In the early months of 541, the great city of Constantinople stood at the height of its power, its harbors crowded with ships, its markets full, its streets alive with the constant motion of a thriving imperial capital. Then, without warning, something invisible began to move through the city. At first it was subtle isolated illnesses, a few unexplained deaths. Within weeks, the rhythm of daily life faltered. By the time the scale became undeniable, the city was no longer functioning as an empire's center. It had become the epicenter of one of the deadliest pandemics in recorded history. The outbreak that would later be known as the Justinian Plague did not begin in Constantinople. Most historical accounts trace its origins to regions south of the Mediterranean, likely in parts of East Africa, where trade networks connected distant territories to the Byzantine world. From there, the disease followed established commercial routes, moving northward along the Nile into Egypt, one of the empire's most critical provinces. Egypt's grain shipments were essential to feeding Constantinople, and the ships that carried wheat also carried something far more dangerous. By the time the disease reached the great port of Alexandria, it had already begun to establish a pattern. Contemporary accounts, particularly those of the historian Procopius, describe a rapid spread that overwhelmed local populations. From Alexandria, merchant vessels transported goods and infected rodents and fleas across the Mediterranean. When these ships arrived in Constantinople in 541, they brought with them a pathogen that would transform the city within months. Constantinople, with its dense population and constant influx of goods and people, was especially vulnerable. As the capital of the Byzantine Empire under Emperor Justinian I, it was one of the largest cities in the world at the time, with estimates ranging from several 100,000 to nearly 500,000 inhabitants. Its infrastructure, though advanced for its era, was not equipped to manage a crisis of this scale. The first signs were easy to dismiss. Individuals developed fevers, fatigue, and swelling in certain parts of the body. These symptoms, however, progressed rapidly. Many who fell ill died within days. As cases multiplied, it became clear that this was not a localized illness but something far more severe. Procopius provides one of the most detailed contemporary descriptions of the outbreak. He notes that the disease spread across all parts of the city, affecting people regardless of status, occupation, or wealth. There was no clear pattern of immunity. The emperor himself, Justinian, is recorded to have fallen ill during the outbreak, though he ultimately recovered. As the number of deaths increased, the administrative systems of the city began to strain. Burial practices, which relied on organized processes in designated spaces, could not keep pace with the rising toll. Initially, families attempted to bury their dead according to tradition. But as fatalities surged into the thousands each day, these efforts became unsustainable. Authorities resorted to more drastic measures. Large pits were dug outside the city walls to accommodate the growing number of bodies. When these too filled, alternative solutions were attempted, including the use of fortified towers where bodies were stacked in layers. These actions were not driven by ceremony but by necessity, as the primary concern became the removal of the dead to prevent further disruption. Daily life in Constantinople came to a near standstill. Markets closed as merchants either fell ill or fled the city. Trade declined sharply, not only due to the loss of manpower but also because of widespread fear. Labor shortages affected every sector, from agriculture to construction. Even essential services were disrupted, as workers tasked with maintaining the city's infrastructure were no longer available in sufficient numbers. The economic consequences were immediate. With fewer people able to work, production dropped significantly. The flow of goods into the city slowed, leading to shortages and rising prices. At the same time, the imperial treasury faced increasing pressure, as tax revenues declined while the need for public expenditure grew. Social structures were also affected. The sudden loss of large portions of the population disrupted family networks and community ties. Many individuals found themselves without support systems, as relatives and neighbors succumbed to the disease. In some cases, properties were left abandoned, their owners gone with no heirs to claim them. Despite these challenges, the imperial administration attempted to maintain order. Justinian's government implemented measures to stabilize the situation, including efforts to regulate prices and ensure the distribution of food. However, the scale of the crisis limited the effectiveness of these interventions. The psychological impact on the population was profound. Contemporary sources describe a city gripped by uncertainty and fear. With no clear understanding of the disease's cause or method of transmission, people struggled to make sense of what was happening. Religious interpretations were common, with many viewing the outbreak as a form of divine judgment or trial. Places of worship saw increased activity, as individuals sought reassurance and meaning in the face of widespread mortality. At the same time, the sheer number of deaths challenged traditional religious practices, particularly those related to burial and mourning. Clergy members, like the general population, were not immune to the disease, further complicating the situation. The peak of the outbreak in Constantinople is estimated to have occurred in 542. During this period, some accounts suggest that thousands of people were dying each day. While exact figures are difficult to verify, it is widely accepted that a significant portion of the city's population perished, possibly as much as 40 to 50%. This level of loss had lasting consequences for the Byzantine Empire. The immediate impact was a weakened workforce, which affected both economic productivity and military capacity. Recruitment for the army became more difficult, and the empire's ability to sustain campaigns was diminished. Justinian had ambitious plans to restore Roman territories including campaigns in Italy and North Africa. The plague disrupted these efforts, not only by reducing available manpower but also by straining financial resources. Military operations slowed, and in some cases, gains were harder to maintain. Beyond Constantinople, the plague continued to spread throughout the empire and beyond. It reached other major cities, including Antioch and Jerusalem, and extended into parts of Europe and the Near East. Trade networks that had facilitated economic growth now served as pathways for the disease. The recurrence of the plague in subsequent years compounded its impact. The initial outbreak was followed by waves that returned periodically over the next 2 centuries. While later outbreaks were not always as severe as the first, they contributed to a sustained period of demographic and economic pressure. In the long term, the Justinian Plague is considered one of the factors that contributed to the transformation of the late antique world. The reduction in population affected urban centers more significantly than rural areas, leading to shifts in settlement patterns. Some cities never fully recovered their previous levels of activity or importance. Economic structures also evolved in response to these changes. With fewer workers available, labor became more valuable in certain contexts, altering traditional relationships between landowners and laborers. Agricultural production adapted, and in some regions, there was a move toward less labor-intensive practices. The administrative capacity of the Byzantine state was tested by the repeated outbreaks. While the empire remained intact, its ability to project power and maintain control over distant territories was gradually affected. Combined with other challenges, including external invasions and internal political dynamics, the plague contributed to a period of transition. It is important to note that historical understanding of the Justinianic plague has evolved over time. Modern research, including genetic analysis of ancient remains, has identified the bacterium Yersinia pestis as the likely cause. This places the outbreak within the broader context of plague pandemics, including the later Black Death of the 14th century. However, the experiences of those living through the 6th century outbreak were shaped by the knowledge and beliefs of their time. Without the scientific frameworks available today, responses were based on observation, tradition, and religious interpretation. These responses, while limited in effectiveness against the disease itself, provide valuable insight into how societies cope with large-scale crises. The story of Constantinople during the plague is not only one of loss but also of resilience. Despite the scale of the disaster, the city did not disappear. Over time, it recovered, rebuilt, and continued to serve as a central hub of the Byzantine Empire for centuries to come. Yet the memory of 541 and 542 remained a defining moment. It marked a point at which the limits of human control became evident, even in a city that represented the height of contemporary civilization. The systems that had supported its growth, trade, urban density, administrative complexity, also made it vulnerable. In examining this period, the significance of the Justinianic plague lies not only in the number of lives lost but in its broader impact on history. It altered the trajectory of an empire, influenced economic and social structures, and reshaped the relationship between human societies and the forces that affect them. Constantinople endured, but it did so as a changed city. The silence that followed the height of the outbreak, after the noise of commerce and daily life had faded, reflected a reality that could not be reversed. The population would grow again, trade would resume, and the empire would continue. But the events of those years left a lasting imprint, one that would echo through the centuries as a reminder of how quickly even the most powerful centers can be transformed.